Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract money effortlessly, as if it's their natural state, while others work hard their entire lives and still struggle to pay the bills? It seems unfair, doesn't it? But what if I told you that money was never the problem, and that perhaps it's trying to find you but can't because you're tuned into the wrong frequency? Yes, money might be looking for you right this moment, and yet you keep it away, without even realizing it. I know, it sounds impossible, but believe me, the impossibility lies only in a mind that hasn't yet been reprogrammed. For a long time, I lived believing that the secret to having more money was simply to work more. The more hours I put in, the more effort I made, the more results I would get. That's what I was taught since I was a child. So, without thinking, I followed that path. I spent years waking up early, sleeping late, burning myself out in jobs that didn't help me grow. And what did I get in the end? A salary that barely covered my debts. I looked around and saw people who seemed to exert less effort, but lived better. And that left me confused, even indignant. Why did some seem to have incredible good fortune, while I did everything right and went nowhere? I thought the problem was the world, the government, the economy, anything but my own way of thinking. But the truth is, effort by itself was never enough. I was expending energy in the wrong place. Because effort without awareness is like rowing a boat with a hole in it. You get tired, you get frustrated, and you stay stuck in the same spot. What truly moves the boat forward is direction. And direction comes from the mind. I didn't realize that my way of thinking about money was completely distorted. I believed that money was scarce, that only a privileged few could have it, and that to earn more, I would have to give up something: time, health, happiness. And as long as I believed that, that's exactly what I would continue to experience. How many people do you know who are trapped in that same cycle? Good, dedicated, hard-working people who spend their entire lives just trying to survive. They exert effort, but without the awareness that their effort is aligned with lack, not abundance. And the universe responds to that. It doesn't deliver what you want, it delivers what you are. If within you there is scarcity, fear, and worry, that's what the world will reflect back. I had to reach my limit to understand that effort doesn't create wealth. It merely reveals the type of belief that sustains your actions. I worked too much because deep down I didn't believe I could prosper with ease. I believed I needed to suffer to deserve it. And when you believe that only suffering brings results, the universe gives you more opportunities to suffer. It's harsh, but it's the truth. The change began when I stopped running and started observing. I realized that every time something good happened in my life, I was in a different mental state. Calmer, more open, more confident. It was as if money only drew closer. When I stopped trying to control it, I started to perceive that money is attracted by clarity and repelled by desperation. From that point on, I completely shifted my focus. I began to ask myself, why do some people with less experience, less education, and less effort earn more? And the answer was simple, yet profound. They aren't trying to make money. They are becoming the kind of person that money seeks out. They vibrate differently, believe differently, speak differently, and that changes everything. I remember when I still worked at the fire department. It was a secure, stable job, but I felt trapped. Earning a fixed salary made me feel protected, but it also kept me limited. I worked with incredible men, but I noticed that many of them lived in fear of losing the little they had. I had that fear too. But one day, upon realizing that all my effort was only keeping me surviving, something inside me broke. I thought, what if the problem isn't the job? What if it's my mindset about what's possible? That question changed my life, because money doesn't multiply in your bank account before it multiplies in your mind. And that's not a metaphor, it's literal. You will never hold a larger amount than the amount you believe you deserve. The mind rejects what it's not ready to receive. That's why even when I started to earn a little more, I always found a way to lose it all. I unconsciously sabotaged myself, because deep within me there was still the belief that I was not worthy of abundance. And perhaps you're experiencing this now. Perhaps you're tired, feeling like you're doing everything right. But life doesn't seem to reward you. If that's the case, it's time to stop measuring success by how much you work and start measuring by how much you grow internally. Because money isn't a reward for physical effort. It's a consequence of your mental vibration. When you change your vibration, effort transforms into pleasure, work into purpose, and money stops being something you chase. It becomes something that finds you. The true turning point begins when you understand that effort without direction is wasted. That the more you try to prove your worth through work, the more the universe understands that you still don't believe in your own power. And that's precisely why it keeps testing you. But the instant you change your intention, when you work not to survive but to expand, everything changes. Ideas appear, the right people emerge, opportunities multiply. Not because the world changed, but because you changed. Money was never the problem. It was always trying to find you. But as long as your mindset is stuck in the belief that effort is the only way, you will continue to run from it. Life rewards clarity, not exhaustion. And the day you understand this, you will realize that the work that truly transforms isn't what you do with your hands, but what you do with your mind. It's this kind of work that money respects, recognizes, and seeks out, because it vibrates at the same frequency as abundance. It took me a long time to understand that the human mind is like invisible software that controls every choice, every emotion, and every outcome in our lives. For years I lived with a program running inside me that said, "You're not good enough, you weren't born for this. Money is for others." These phrases were so ingrained that I didn't even notice them anymore. And the curious thing is that they weren't mine. They were installed there by other people. Parents, teachers, friends, society as a whole, repeating that success is hard, that money is dangerous, that those who want too much end up frustrated. I accepted it all without questioning, and that was the biggest mistake. The problem is that the subconscious doesn't argue. It just obeys, and when you spend your life hearing that wealth is unattainable, your subconscious records that as a command. It creates a kind of internal limit that determines how far you can go, and you begin to live within an invisible prison. You can even dream big, but you always return to the same spot. It's like trying to drive with the parking brake on. You exert effort, but you don't go anywhere. Most people live this way. They believe they need more knowledge, more courses, more opportunities. And when they don't get results, they think it's because something is still missing. But what's really missing is an update to the mental programming, because there's no use learning new techniques if the mind that will execute them still operates on old codes. The conscious mind may even understand what needs to be done, but the subconscious makes the real decisions, and it doesn't change with information. It changes with repetition and emotion. I remember one time I participated in a leadership training. I watched the instructors explain every step, and the students nodded, saying, "I understand." But when it was time to apply it, everything fell apart. They reverted to acting as they always had, with fear, with hesitation, repeating the same mistakes. It was there that I realized the problem wasn't the content, it was the conditioning. Knowing what to do isn't the same as being mentally prepared to do it. And perhaps this is where you find yourself now. You've read good books, attended lectures, tried to change your life multiple times, but remain stuck in the same cycle. And it's not because you lack discipline, it's because your subconscious is still programmed to keep you safe in the familiar. Even if the familiar is painful, its function is to preserve, not to transform. It prefers the comfort zone of scarcity to the uncertainty of abundance. Changing this pattern requires courage. Courage to question everything you've believed until now. When I started to challenge my beliefs, I realized that almost all of them came from people who also struggled with money. People who loved me but had never learned to prosper, and I unconsciously inherited their emotional limitations. When I understood this, something inside me broke free. I realized that I could choose a new program, and that the entire life I had known until then was merely a reflection of my thoughts. Imagine this. Your mind is like a garden. If you plant ideas of fear, doubt, and guilt, that's exactly what will flourish. There's no use complaining about the harvest if you never change the seeds. The good news is that anyone can replant, and the soil of the mind is fertile enough to receive something new at any moment. But you need to start with one decision. Stop accepting as truth what others told you was your limit. Once I realized the power of my subconscious, I began to observe myself more carefully. I started noticing the automatic thoughts that sabotaged me every day. This is too much for me. It won't work out. I don't deserve this much. These phrases echoed from the past, and every time I recognized them, I consciously replaced them with a new affirmation. I am capable. I am worthy. I am ready. I repeated this even when I didn't truly believe it, because I knew the mind learns through consistency. The transformation began when I realized I didn't need to feel certain to start. All it took was repeating until the new thought became more familiar than the old one. Gradually, my mind accepted the new programming. I started acting differently, making different decisions, and naturally the results began to shift. Not because the world became easier, but because I began to behave like someone who believes they can. The subconscious is a silent yet powerful force. It's like an engine that never turns off. When programmed for scarcity, it will find ways to keep you there, sabotaging your opportunities and disguising it as bad luck. But when you program it for prosperity, it starts to protect you from what limits you and effortlessly guides you toward what expands you. The difference between a person who thrives and one who merely survives isn't in talent, nor in their degree, nor in their circumstances. It lies in the internal code each person chooses to feed. And if the program running inside you has only brought struggle and frustration so far, perhaps it's time to reinstall a new one. Because the real block isn't in the world, it's in the thought you haven't yet dared to change. And the day you update that system, you'll realize that money, opportunities, and the right people have always been there, just waiting for the correct command to appear. There was a day when everything began to change, and curiously, it wasn't an extraordinary day. I was still working for the Toronto Fire Department with the same predictable routine and a salary that barely covered my debts. It was one of those periods in life when you no longer expect big surprises. And it was precisely in this setting that destiny decided to present itself in the form of a book. A man named Raymond Stanford handed me a copy of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I had no idea the impact that simple gesture would have. I took the book out of politeness, but I confess at first I didn't even believe something so ordinary could change anything. Still, something within me decided to read it. With each page, I felt a different discomfort, as if those words were calling me to responsibility. I read about faith, purpose, and mindset while still wearing my firefighter's uniform, and I began to realize that the book wasn't about money, it was about consciousness. It was a shock to perceive that the problem had never been outside of me, but within. That made me think about how many times I had blamed luck, the economy, the people around me, without realizing that the key had always been in my own hands. At that time, I had no formal education, no connections, and honestly no clear vision for the future. But when I started rereading that book, something began to transform. Hill's words started acting like a new code being inserted into my subconscious. I read and repeated, read and imagined, and even without fully understanding, my way of thinking began to expand. I started questioning everything that had once seemed certain. Why did I work so hard and still live in debt? Why did other people with less effort prosper? The book forced me to confront a difficult truth. The world doesn't change when you complain about it. It changes when you change the way you see it, and that's where the transformation began. I started to realize that every thought I harbored had a direct effect on my results. If I believed there were no opportunities, the universe confirmed it. If I believed I could, somehow, find a way, the universe also confirmed it. It was as if the world was simply reflecting what I emitted. I became obsessed with understanding this more deeply. It wasn't enough to read it once, so I read it again, took notes, underlined, meditated on every sentence. I wanted to understand how a simple internal change could alter everything around me. As the days passed, I started noticing small things happening. New ideas emerged, different people approached me, and, above all, my emotional state began to change. I felt lighter, more confident, more curious about what might be possible. It was as if a new energy was moving me. And this is the point many people don't understand. It's not knowledge that changes your life. It's the mental state it awakens within you. When emotion aligns with belief, reality begins to respond. I distinctly remember the moment I decided to put the book into practice. I wrote down a goal that felt absurd to me at the time. I am very happy and grateful now that I earn $25,000 a year. I was barely earning $4,000, owed more than that, and yet I wrote it. Because I wanted to test that idea. I wanted to discover if what was written there was true or just a nice speech, and it was in that simple act, writing and believing, that everything began to move. I didn't know how, but something inside me said that the how was not my problem. My only job was to decide, believe, and act. Over time, I realized something I never forgot. When your mind changes direction, the entire world begins to reorganize itself around that new path. I started seeing opportunities where I once saw obstacles. What had seemed impossible before began to appear plausible. I still didn't know what I was doing, but I felt I was on the right track. It was as if money and opportunities had always been there, but until then I hadn't had the right eyes to see them. It was an intense period. I read the book so many times that some pages started to come loose. And the more I read, the more I felt something awaken within me, an inner voice that said, "You can. You always could." That was one of the most powerful phrases that echoed in my mind. And it's interesting how life responds when you change your frequency. A short time later, I decided to leave the fire department and open my own cleaning business. Without capital, without experience, without formal planning, just with an idea and a new way of thinking. And that's when the magic happened. In 1 year, that small business grossed over $100,000. For someone who had come from scarcity, that was inconceivable. But what truly surprised me wasn't the money. It was the realization that reality is moldable, and it begins to bend before those who believe with emotion. I understood that that book didn't just change what I knew, it changed who I was. And that's why ever since I have dedicated my life to teaching what I learned at that moment. The power of the mind is limitless, but it only manifests when you believe before you see. Because believing after things happen isn't faith, it's confirmation. True faith is believing when nothing yet makes sense, when everything seems to contradict you, and yet you continue to affirm within yourself, "I know it will work out." It was this faith, planted by that book in the hands of an ordinary man, that started everything that came afterward. And today, looking back, I realize that simple moment, a book handed over by chance, was the turning point between the life I had and the life that money began to offer me. Because money, like luck and opportunities, had always been around me. It was I who wasn't ready to recognize them. The change began when I stopped doubting and decided to believe. Because life doesn't deliver what you ask for, it delivers what you believe is possible. For a long time, I lived trapped within a cycle that seemed impossible to break. I woke up every day with the same worries, the same thoughts, and consequently, the same results. It was as if the world was stuck in repeat mode. I wanted to change, but I didn't know where to start. It was only when I began observing what was happening inside my mind that I realized the problem wasn't in the circumstances, but in the patterns I was unknowingly repeating. Negative thoughts, bad emotions, impulsive actions, and disappointing results, all of this formed a closed circuit that fed itself. This is the invisible cycle that traps most people. First comes the thought. You think of something that sparks an emotion. That emotion shapes the type of action you take, and your actions inevitably produce a result that confirms the initial thought. It's a mental trap because each time you see the same result, it reinforces the belief that created it. And so the cycle repeats. It's like being inside a labyrinth without realizing the walls are made of ideas. I started observing how this pattern manifested in my own life. When I believed that money was scarce, I felt fear. This fear led me to make defensive decisions. I settled for little, refused opportunities, sabotaged myself. And the result? Scarcity. The same pattern that made me feel insecure continued to be fed, and I lived in a constant state of survival. It was exhausting. The most dangerous thing is that this cycle seems logical. When results don't come, the mind thinks, "See, I was right." But it doesn't realize that it was the belief itself that created that result. The human mind is incredibly powerful, but it doesn't distinguish between what is true and what is habit. If you repeat a negative thought frequently enough, the body begins to react to it as if it were a fact. When an emotion is repeatedly experienced, the body goes into an alert state, and the energy that could be used to create something new is instead channeled into self-protection against fear. I realized that to break this pattern, the cycle needed to be interrupted at some point. And the only point that can truly be altered is the initial thought. You cannot directly change the outcome, you cannot force an emotion, but you can change the type of thought that fuels the entire system. When you alter the thought, the emotion changes. When the emotion shifts, the body responds with new actions, and when the actions change, inevitably, the results are transformed. This is exactly what I began to practice. Instead of automatically reacting to problems, I started observing what I felt in their presence. If something frustrated me, I would ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me about what I believe? I realized that the external world was constantly showing me the thoughts I harbored internally. If my financial life felt stuck, it was because deep down I still held the belief that money was something difficult, distant, or unfair. And make no mistake, changing this pattern is not a one-time event. It is a process. It is like re-educating the brain to think in new ways. Scientific studies show that the brain creates neural pathways for every thought pattern that repeats itself. When you think something for the first time, it is as if you create a faint trail in the forest. But when you repeat the same thought numerous times, that trail transforms into a main road. The problem is that for most people, these main roads are made of fear, doubt, and scarcity. So, when a new opportunity arises, the mind simply reverts to the path it knows best, that of limitation. That is why I realized I needed to practice the conscious replacement of thoughts. Every time I caught my mind saying, "This is difficult," I would mentally respond, "This is possible," and saying it just once was not enough. I repeated it until that new idea began to sound familiar. Familiarity is the secret. The mind resists the new until it becomes common, and what is common becomes comfortable. This is how I began to transform my beliefs without fighting against them. I remember a phase when everything seemed to go wrong. A business I had started was not thriving, bills were accumulating, and the old thought began to resurface. Perhaps I am not good enough. But this time, I was conscious. I knew that thought was not a fact. It was just an old reflection trying to regain control. So instead of giving in, I sat down, closed my eyes, and imagined myself as someone prosperous, secure, and grateful. I did this repeatedly, and what seemed like mere imagination began to become a real sensation. I felt my body reacting, my heart beating differently, fear losing its grip. Over time, changes began to happen again. Ideas emerged, people appeared, and solutions that once seemed impossible became obvious. All because my internal state had changed. And this is what people need to understand. Results are merely a mirror of your mental state. There is no point in trying to manipulate the mirror if you do not change the image reflected in it. The big turning point happens when you realize you do not have to wait for results to change before you start feeling different. It is the opposite. You change the results when you start feeling different before anything else changes, because the universe does not respond to what you desire. It responds to your emotional frequency. When you vibrate scarcity, you attract lack. When you vibrate confidence and gratitude, you attract expansion. The invisible cycle only breaks when you change what feeds it. It is as if, for years, you have watered a plant that held you captive and suddenly decided to plant something new. Change does not happen overnight, but it does happen. And when it begins, what was once repetition turns into evolution. What was once fear turns into movement. And that is when you truly understand that the external world is merely a mirror of your internal world. Change the reflection, and the scenery changes with it. Repetition was the secret that completely transformed my life. For years, I thought reading a book once was enough, that listening to an inspiring lecture was sufficient to change everything. But the truth is, nothing truly changes until the mind accepts that new idea as a part of who you are. And that only happens through repetition. The human mind is like a fertile field. It does not flourish with a seed thrown once, but with constant daily cultivation until the new belief takes deep root. I remember when I first started studying personal development. I would listen to Earl Nightingale speak on his old recordings, those audio tapes I carried with me everywhere. I listened to them dozens, perhaps hundreds of times. At first, I thought I was just listening, but over time, I realized I was being reprogrammed. Each repetition made those words penetrate a little deeper into my subconscious. And without me even realizing it, my way of thinking began to change. I was not just learning something new, I was becoming a new person. People underestimate the power of repetition because they believe change is an event. But real change is a process, and this process demands patience. The brain does not transform with one brilliant idea. It transforms with continuous exposure to a powerful idea. Every time you repeat a belief, you reinforce a neural pathway within your brain. And the more times you travel that path, the more natural it becomes. That is how the impossible becomes habit. I began to realize that my entire life was a collection of unconscious repetitions. I would repeat negative thoughts without realizing it. It won't work. It is too difficult. I cannot do it. These phrases seemed innocent, but each one was a mental command that held me captive. When I understood this, I decided to reverse the process. If I could program myself for failure unconsciously, I could also consciously reprogram myself for success. So I created my own ritual. Every day, without fail, I would read and repeat positive affirmations. I wrote them on cards, taped them to the wall, and read them aloud until I felt those words become a part of me. I clearly remember one phrase that stayed with me for years. I am very happy and grateful now that I earn $1 million per year. At first it seemed like a joke. I earned far less than that, and my mind screamed, "Lie," every time I said it. But I kept repeating it because I understood that the mind does not differentiate truth from habit. It simply accepts what is constant. Over time, the resistance began to wane. The words that once sounded strange began to sound familiar, and familiarity brought belief. And when the belief shifted, everything around me started to move. I made different decisions, behaved in another way, and people began to see me differently. It was as if the universe was responding to the new frequency I was emanating. Repetition is the foundation of self-transformation. People want new results, but they keep repeating old thoughts. They want financial freedom, but daily repeat that money is difficult. They want success, but repeat, "This is not for me." The universe is neutral. It simply returns what you emit with the most consistency. What you say once does not matter as much as what you say every day, especially when you say it silently within your own mind. I saw this happen not only with myself, but with countless people. I have trained entrepreneurs, salespeople, mothers, young people, all with the same pattern. They wanted to change their lives, but they were in a hurry. They would repeat a new idea for a few days and then give up. It is like going to the gym for 1 week and expecting a new body. Transformation does not happen on the first repetition, but on the 1000th, when the mind stops resisting and starts accepting the new as natural. Science confirms this. The brain needs constant exposure to create new neural pathways. It is what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself according to the stimuli it receives. This means that when you repeat a positive idea, you are literally remodeling the structure of your brain. You are building new connections, strengthening new synapses and weakening old ones. It is a physical and spiritual process happening at the same time. But there is an important detail. Repetition only works when accompanied by emotion. Saying something mechanically changes nothing. You need to feel it. When you repeat an affirmation, feel what it would be like to live that reality. Feel the freedom, the gratitude, the security. Because the subconscious does not understand words, it understands vibrations. And emotion is the language of vibration. When thought and emotion unite, they create a magnetic field capable of attracting equivalent circumstances. I tested this countless times. There were days when I saw no progress at all, when it seemed I was just repeating words to the wind. But I persisted, and suddenly things started to fall into place. I found the right people, the right opportunities, the right doors opened. And I understood that none of this was coincidence, it was consequence. The universe was merely responding to the new pattern I had installed within myself. The secret is not just to believe when everything is already going well, but to repeat even when nothing seems to be working, because it is at that point that repetition transforms into faith. And faith is the most powerful creative energy that exists. When you continue to believe even without seeing, the universe understands that you are ready. And when you are ready, what is yours begins to seek you out. I've come to realize that true discipline isn't about hard labor, but about mental steadfastness. It's the daily pledge to recall who you are and who you aspire to be, until that belief becomes unshakable. To repeat isn't a sign of weakness, it's how you sculpt the unseen. This is the mechanism by which the mind cultivates the habit of abundance, and how earning money transforms from a struggle into an inevitable outcome. For anything reiterated with enough genuine emotion, sooner or later materializes into reality. There comes a point in your journey when change ceases to be merely a pleasant notion and instead becomes an absolute imperative. You feel it deep within. You simply cannot go on living the same old way, perpetuating the same outcomes, the same anxieties, the same constraints. I personally experienced that distinct moment, and it is unmistakable. It's that precise instant when your soul yearns for expansion, even as your physical self remains tethered to the familiar past. And it was at that juncture that I had to make a crucial choice: to remain the person I was, or to evolve into the individual I inherently knew I could become. However, transformation demands decisive action, and truly deciding is far more profound than it initially appears. Most people mistakenly conflate wishing with deciding. Wishing is effortless. Anyone can wish. Wishing costs nothing. To decide, on the other hand, means actively eliminating all other alternatives. It's when you firmly declare to yourself, "This is it, and there's no turning back." Life responds to clarity with forward momentum and to hesitation with stagnation. I recognized that as long as I kept wavering, the universe would continue to challenge me. And that's when I grasped one of the most critical lessons of my entire journey. The universe doesn't simply hand you what you desire. It grants you what you are truly prepared to uphold. And being ready isn't a matter of luck. It's a matter of alignment. When you make the choice to change, something within you begins to resonate with a new frequency. Fear may still linger, and your circumstances might not shift immediately, but a subtle, almost imperceptible movement starts to unfold. And it's precisely during this phase that many people abandon their efforts, because the old mindset will attempt to drag you back. It will whisper that it's perilous, that you're not equipped, that it's safer to remain exactly where you are. But it is precisely then that you must persist. This is the crucial juncture where the former you begins to fade and the new you starts to emerge. When I began to delve deeply into the study of the mind and the law of attraction, I realized that everything in life is drawn to you by frequency. Thoughts are vibrations. Emotions are vibrations. What you consistently feel dictates what you attract. And this is one of the reasons I want to ask you something right now. If what I've shared so far resonates with you, if in some way these words are stirring something within you, please click like and subscribe immediately. Do this as a symbolic act, not merely as a superficial gesture, because from this very moment you are affirming to your mind, "I choose to change." It's a simple yet potent way to solidify your commitment to transformation. The decision to transform yourself marks the pivotal turning point between an ordinary existence and an extraordinary life. I have witnessed this unfold hundreds of times with individuals who consciously applied these principles. Some began from scratch, burdened by debt, lacking any support, yet possessing a singular element that altered everything: a firm and consistently reiterated decision. And it is astonishing how the universe responds to such potent energy. I experienced this myself firsthand. When I resolved to leave my job at the fire department, many labeled me insane. I had no certainties, no starting capital, not even a structured plan. But what I did possess was unwavering conviction. And that conviction propelled me forward. Fear is a natural response. It invariably emerges whenever you choose to grow. But fear is merely the shadow cast by the unfamiliar. The unknown isn't inherently dangerous, it is simply novel. And as long as you shy away from what's new, you will continue to recycle what's old. I had to confront this within myself. I recall countless nights I lay awake, pondering whether I had made the correct choice. And each time doubt crept in, I would repeat to myself, I have decided, and my decision is final. It was as though I was reaffirming my pact with the future. It was this consistent repetition of my decision that began to shift my vibration. I recognized that the universe doesn't react to idle words. It responds to the sheer energy of unwavering commitment. When you genuinely decide, fear doesn't vanish. It capitulates. And when it capitulates, the path ahead begins to unfold. You start to notice signs, serendipitous encounters, unlikely coincidences. It is life itself rearranging to support you, because you are now in perfect alignment with what you proclaim you desire. Decision is the spark that awakens the creative power dormant within you, but it absolutely must be accompanied by action. It isn't merely about thinking positively or wishing intensely. It's about acting in accordance with what you believe, even when there's no tangible evidence yet that it will succeed. It is in this precise moment that faith truly manifests. Faith isn't passively waiting. Faith is behaving as though it has already come to pass. And the more you act with such faith, the more the universe acknowledges your energy as a directive. I've come to realize that every significant shift in my life originated with a simple choice, yet one made with absolute conviction. When I opted to believe in myself, opportunities began to surface. When I chose to surround myself with positive individuals, the energy around me transformed. When I decided to cultivate gratitude, even without obvious reasons, my vibration ascended, and financial abundance began to flow towards me. Nothing transpired by chance. Everything began with a decision. And that is why I assert, as long as you continue to wait for conditions to become flawless, change will never materialize. Conditions become ideal after the decision is made, never beforehand, because decision is the catalyst that activates the invisible forces of the universe. It serves as the unmistakable signal that you are prepared to receive, and the universe responds instantly to those who commit to what they profess to desire. The decision to alter your mindset doesn't need to be monumental, it simply needs to be genuine. Start modestly, but start without delay. Declare to yourself that from this day forward, you will think differently, act differently, and vibrate at a different frequency. Because your external world is merely a mirror of your internal state. And what you decide today, reinforce tomorrow, and uphold the day after, ultimately becomes your destiny. Decide with your heart, not from a place of fear. Decide through faith, not through doubt. Because when you genuinely choose to transform, the entire universe aligns and decides with you. Have you ever noticed how most people give up even before the actual process truly begins? They claim they tried, that they repeated affirmations, that they visualized, but it just didn't work out. And that, precisely, is the fundamental flaw. Change doesn't materialize in a single week. Just as a seed doesn't blossom on the very day it's planted, the mind also requires time to germinate new ideas. Everything you desire is taking shape on an unseen level, long before it manifests in the physical realm. But the majority of people lack the patience to allow the process to mature. They wish to harvest without ever planting. They demand the outcome before the thought has even solidified in their subconscious. I recall the first instance I grasped the profound power of conscious repetition. I used to carry around a small tape recorder, one of those vintage ones, and I would listen repeatedly to the words of Earl Nightingale. I didn't fully comprehend everything right away, but I allowed those messages to permeate my mind every single day until a part of me truly began to believe. It was akin to redrawing the very map of my mind. Gradually, my decisions started to shift. I no longer harbored as much doubt. And that's when I realized repetition isn't just for remembering something. It serves to transform you entirely. It forges a bridge between what you intellectually know and what you fundamentally are. Most people severely underestimate the power of consistent perseverance. They might utter an affirmation for a few days and, believing nothing has changed, simply cease. Yet, if you observe truly great athletes, musicians, or entrepreneurs, they all share one common trait. They repeat. They repeat until it becomes second nature. This is pure neuroscience. The brain actively secures new neural pathways through repeated practice. Each time you visualize your ideal future with genuine emotion, you strengthen those very neural connections. It's like carving new trails through a dense forest. Initially, it's arduous. You have to push aside branches and obstacles, but with consistent effort, that path becomes progressively easier, clearer, until one day you traverse it without any conscious effort. When you affirm something and truly feel as though it is real, your subconscious mind makes no distinction between imagination and reality. It simply records whatever is repeated with emotion. This is precisely why so many individuals experience scarcity, because often without even realizing it, they constantly repeat phrases such as, "It's impossible," "It's too difficult," or "There's no solution." They affirm the negative with such profound emotion that they end up programming their own minds for failure. And then they resort to blaming fate, the government, their boss, or mere chance. But luck, as a concept, doesn't truly exist. What exists is vibration. And you vibrate that which you genuinely believe to be true about yourself. I distinctly remember a period in my life when I was absolutely convinced that financial prosperity was entirely beyond my reach. I would observe affluent individuals and think, that's for them, not for me. But everything shifted the moment I began to truly listen to my own self-talk. I recognized how much I was inadvertently reinforcing scarcity through my very own words. So, I deliberately did the opposite. I started to repeat phrases such as, "I am prosperous," "Money flows to me effortlessly," and "I deserve abundance." Initially, it felt like I was telling myself a lie, but I persisted. And that's when the miracle occurred. The lie, repeated with sufficient emotion, transformed into my new, undeniable truth. This is precisely how the mind operates. It isn't swayed by mere logic. It is convinced by emotion and persistent repetition. You might intellectually comprehend that you deserve the very best, but if deep down you still harbor guilt, fear, or uncertainty, your vibration will remain unchanged. That is why it is absolutely essential to fuse emotion with your thoughts. It's insufficient to simply utter, "I am wealthy." You must genuinely feel the freedom, the joy, and the confidence that such a state represents. You need to vividly envision yourself living that reality. You must believe it so profoundly that your entire being responds to this powerful idea. At this point, the vibration shifts and the world responds. You might be thinking, "But I can't feel rich if I'm in debt." And I get that, but that's precisely where the training begins. It's not about denying reality. It's about creating a new one within yourself. It's about training your emotional system to react differently. Every time you choose a thought of prosperity, you're re-educating your brain and altering your body's chemistry. Fear will diminish and hope will grow. From that point on, your decisions shift. You start seeing opportunities that were previously invisible because your frequency is now tuned to perceive them. Many people say, "I believe, but I don't feel it." And I respond, keep going. Keep going until you feel it. Keep going even when it seems pointless. Because it's precisely at this point, when the old pattern is about to break, that most people give up. The subconscious resists change. It craves what is familiar. But if you persist, if you hold on to the new thought with faith and emotion, a moment will come when it becomes automatic. And then something incredible happens. You stop trying to believe and simply know. And when you know, the entire world rearranges itself to prove you right. The truth is, the universe doesn't respond to effort. It responds to coherence. You can work hard, study, strive, but if your vibration remains stuck in scarcity, nothing will flow. The right effort with the wrong vibration is like rowing against the tide. On the other hand, when your mind and heart are aligned towards abundance, doors open. Money, ideas, connections, everything starts to seek you out. And that's why repetition is the greatest act of faith. It's living proof that you believe in what you cannot yet see. So if today you feel that nothing is changing, that you're stuck, don't give up. Conscious repetition is like sharpening a blade. Each time you affirm, feel, and believe, you cut a little more through the veil of limitation. Keep repeating, keep visualizing, keep believing, Because the moment your subconscious accepts the new programming, money will cease to be something you chase and will become something that chases you. Fear is a silent yet powerful energy. It masquerades as prudence, logic, and common sense, and that's precisely why most people obey it without realizing. They call it being realistic, when in truth they are being controlled by the fear of losing the little they have. Fear doesn't shout, it whispers, "What if it goes wrong? What if you fail? What if everyone judges you?" And without realizing it, you start living defensively against something that hasn't even happened yet. This is how fear creates a prison without walls, an invisible cell where life seems safe, but the soul withers. I learned this the hard way. When I decided to quit my job in the fire department, I had no savings, no elaborate plan, and no idea what would come next. I only had one certainty. I couldn't keep living a life that didn't make me feel alive. And at that moment, the voice of fear was deafening. It said, "And you'll regret it, you'll fail, you'll end up with nothing." But there was another voice, soft, firm, almost imperceptible, saying, "Trust." That was the first time I truly understood that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Fear is a biological mechanism, a natural bodily response to protect us. The problem is that most people don't use it as an alert, but as an anchor. They let it keep them stuck. And the paradox is that fear only disappears when you confront it. The more you try to protect yourself from pain, the more pain dominates your life. When you finally take the step towards what you fear, something magical happens. Fear loses its grip, because you realize it was merely a projection of your mind, not a reality. Many people believe they need security before they can change, but the truth is the opposite. Security emerges after the decision, never before. The feeling of stability doesn't come from circumstances, it comes from faith. Faith in yourself, faith in the process, faith in the idea that the universe rewards those who move. When I quit my job, I didn't have a ready-made path, but the path appeared as I walked. It's like crossing a bridge that only appears with each step you take. And that's why most people never cross. They want to see the entire bridge before moving. You might be in this phase now, stuck between what's familiar and what's possible. You want something new, but you cling to the old because it gives you an illusion of control. But control is the opposite of growth. Everything alive changes, flows, transforms. And money as energy also flows where there is movement, where there is courage. When you decide to break free from stagnation, the universe starts conspiring in your favor, not before. That's why I always say, if you want the new to come in, create space. And creating space requires you to let go of what no longer serves you. There was a time when I was teaching about this in a seminar. I would tell people, if you have something you don't love, release it. The universe abhors a vacuum. It always fills the space. I returned home that day and discovered that my assistants had literally thrown out all the old kitchen furniture. For one instant, I felt anger, shock, disbelief. But soon I started to laugh. They had understood the lesson better than many people, and I realized how much I myself still clung to old things out of habit, not necessity. A few days later, the perfect opportunity arose to renovate that space, and everything flowed. It was living proof that detachment is the first step towards abundance. But make no mistake, detaching is not easy. When you let go of the old, there's a moment of emptiness, an uncomfortable silence. It's the interval between what was and what isn't yet. And it's in this interval that fear tries to creep back in, screaming that you've made a mistake. But it's at this moment that faith needs to speak louder. It's like the flapping wings of a bird that doesn't yet know if it will fly, but nonetheless leaps from the branch. The courage is in that leap, and it's that leap that opens the way. There's an important detail almost no one talks about. Fear doesn't disappear completely. It transforms. The more you grow, the more it changes its form. Initially, it stops you from starting. Later, it tries to make you stop. And you need to learn to recognize it not as an enemy, but as a sign of expansion. Whenever you feel fear, understand this. You're about to leave the old vibration and enter a new one. Fear is proof that you're approaching something greater. So instead of running, be grateful for feeling it. It's guiding you. Scientists have already proven that chronic fear elevates cortisol levels, the stress hormone. and reduces creativity and mental clarity. That's why when we're trapped in fear, we become blind to opportunities. But when you calm your mind, when you breathe deeply and say, "I trust," your body shifts its frequency. Ideas begin to flow, connections form, and money starts circulating again. Because fear contracts and trust expands. To prosper is essentially a state of expansion. Think about it. How many opportunities have passed you by, and you let them slip away because you were afraid to take a risk? How many times have you said no to something that could have changed your life? How many dreams have you shelved because of doubt? And now imagine for one instant if you had said yes. The truth is, the universe always offers the next step, but it will never force you to walk. Movement is your choice, and it's that choice that money recognizes. Money is attracted by courage. It flows to those who act. Therefore, if there's something you want to change but fear has paralyzed you, remember, fear is merely the shadow of absent faith. The more you trust, the less it governs. Take the step. Even if you're trembling, even if you don't know what's coming, life rewards those who have the courage to cross the portal of fear, because on the other side of it lies exactly everything you've ever wanted. And when you do that, you'll realize something extraordinary. Fear was never your enemy. It was just the disguised invitation to your true freedom. I remember one day coming home to discover that all the old furniture in my kitchen had been thrown out. I was shocked, and then I realized my assistants had simply applied what I myself taught: create space for the new. That taught me more than any theory. If you want abundance, stop clinging to what no longer serves you, be it a job, a relationship, or a habit, to leave the old behind, because only then can the new enter. And the most curious thing is that most people want to change their lives but refuse to make space for that change. They say they want to prosper, but they keep closets full of things they don't use, a routine that doesn't inspire them, relationships that drain energy, and thoughts that keep them trapped in the same cycle. It's impossible to receive something new when your hands are busy holding on to the past. I learned this in an almost symbolic way on that day I came home and saw that the old kitchen furniture had disappeared. What, by habit, seemed like a part of my life was no longer there. For one instant I felt that discomfort, that sensation of emptiness, and I realized how many times the universe does for us what we don't have the courage to do ourselves. It removes what no longer serves to make way for what we ask for. However, when this happens, the first feeling isn't joy, it's fear. Because the old, even if limited, is familiar. The new demands surrender. This is the same process that happens within the mind. You want to create a new reality, but you're still full of old thoughts. It's not the right time. I can't. What if it doesn't work out? Each one of these phrases is like an old piece of furniture taking up space within you. And as long as they remain there, there's no room for the idea of abundance to settle in. That's why sometimes the first step to attracting prosperity isn't to do more, but to let go more. Let go of the fear of making mistakes. Let go of the need for approval. Let go of control over how things will unfold. I recall a woman who attended one of my seminars. She had been unhappy at her job for years, but claimed she couldn't leave because she needed to pay her bills. Deep down, what she felt was a fear of emptiness, a fear of the what if. I challenged her to create space, not by suddenly abandoning everything, but by shifting her energy, cleaning her environment, donating what she didn't use, releasing what no longer served a purpose. 2 weeks later, she wrote to me, "Something strange happened. I was called for an interview without even having sent a resume, and I received a better offer." I smiled because I knew exactly what had transpired. The universe saw the space and filled it. Detachment is an act of faith. It communicates to the universe that you trust the flow of life. When you hold on to something for fear of losing it, you are vibrating scarcity. When you let go, you are saying, "I know there is more." And that's why new things arrive when you are light. Have you ever noticed how, after organizing a space, you feel more inspired, more creative? This is no coincidence. The physical environment reflects your internal state. If the exterior is full, the interior is too. And money, which is energy in motion, needs space to circulate. There is a principle called the law of vacuum. It states that nature abhors a vacuum. Where there is space, something new always emerges. But there's a condition. The space needs to be created with intention. It's no use getting rid of something while lamenting its departure. You must release with gratitude, acknowledging that it served its purpose. Give thanks and let it go. That is the difference between loss and liberation. Loss focuses on what has left. Liberation focuses on what is yet to come. Often people ask me, "But Bob, how do I know what I need to let go of?" And I always reply, look at what drains you. Everything that saps your energy, that traps you in repetition, that prevents you from growing, that's what needs to go. It could be a job, a relationship, a belief, or even a memory. Nothing truly blossoms in saturated soil. You need to remove what is old so that life can flourish anew. And there is something fascinating about this. The moment you let go, the universe responds immediately. Sometimes not in the way you expect, but always in the way you need. It could be a new opportunity, an idea, a person, an improbable synchronicity. I have witnessed this happen so many times that I no longer have any doubt. Abundance is like air. It is everywhere, waiting for you to open space to breathe it in. So if today you feel stuck, stagnant, look around and within yourself. What are you still holding on to that should have already gone? What is occupying space that belongs to your future? Life is movement, money is movement, energy is movement, and everything that stops flowing dies. Detachment is the first act of conscious creation. When you release what no longer serves you, the universe understands that you are ready. And when you show that you are ready, it sends you exactly what you have been asking for so long. Do not fear emptiness. It is not absence. It is preparation. It is the fertile ground where the new sprouts. Believe, the emptiness you feel today may just be the space life is opening up to fill with something extraordinary. And when that happens, you will understand that nothing was lost. Everything was exchanged for something better once you dare to step through the portal of fear, because on the other side of it lies exactly everything you have always wanted. And if this message resonated with you, share this video with someone who might be facing the same fears, someone who just needs one spark of courage to take the first step. It could be that this word today is what will completely change the course of that person's life. Thank you for dedicating this moment to your growth, for opening your heart and listening attentively. Continue with me on this journey of transformation, because there is still much more to explore, understand, and apply. I await you in the next video, where we will take one more step towards the abundant life you were born to live.